So it's been about a week now since Angela Rye and members of the Native Land podcast gave, publicly spoke about how they felt about Joe Budden, his podcast, some of the characters on there, namely Flip, in relation to the incident with him, Mark Lamont Hill, and how viral that went. Now, we reacted to Joe reacting to their criticisms. He didn't take it too kindly. And in this video, we got Charlemagne the God, who actually paid them a little visit, spoke with them. And in this one, he's actually defending Joe Budden, and he takes Joe Budden's side in this. So let's get right into it.
But, when I first saw, what y'all talked about last week, I hit Angela, and I was like, I want to talk about what y'all was just speaking about. Not saying I wanted to talk about it on the show. I said, I just want to talk to you personally. And then, when I saw what, Joe Budden said about it, I agreed with Joe. I felt like, it came off, very elitist, very Jack and Jill, very, I got my nose up at these Negroes over here. And I don't think that, you make any.
Exactly what I said, ain't it? Now, it's crazy to have Charlemagne say this, right? And I don't know if he's, doing this for the clicks or if he's just being straight up. I'm going to take him at face value. But this is the same thing I said. This is how it comes off, no matter how you slice it, man. This is how it came off.
You don't make any strides in connecting community by doing that conversation in the way that it was done. I feel like, whenever there's instead of calling people out, sometimes you should call people in. And the whole conversation around who's an intellectual and who's not an intellectual. My biggest issue with it was, well, damn, a person who's an intellectual should look at the whole context of a situation before they have a conversation about it. I feel like, Andrew said one of the strongest points last week when Andrew was like, I don't watch this show enough to have an opinion about it. and then he said,
a true intellectual, not a pseudo intellectual, doesn't allow themselves, or they'll fight it because it can happen to anybody, but they don't allow themselves to go hard in on like myopic viewpoints or get so narrow-minded on just one thing and argue it fervently without at least considering the other factors, right? But that's and this girl's going to prove my point here in a minute.
And then he said, but I trust Mark, being Mark to be in spaces where, he knows he needs to be in. And as I'm listening to the convo, I told Angela that even when she told me that y'all wanted to talk about it, it came up as a topic of discussion. I said, well, make sure you watch the whole thing in context before you just watch a clip of it and then, speak on it for the next 20 or 30 minutes, because to me, that's what an intellectual should do, right? Like, that's what an intelligent person should do. An intelligent person should get the whole context of something before they comment on it, instead of watching like 2 or 3 minutes of something and then actually taking the clip out of context. Because if you watch the clip in context, Mark was actually wrong. If there's a right or wrong in the situation, Mark was actually the one who was wrong in that situation, so much so that he even came back and apologized.
That was another thing I said. Some of y'all didn't agree with me because y'all just don't like Flip. But that was another thing I said.
The next week, and the conversation just kind of made me feel a way like, damn, like that's how we look at each other. As Black people.
Can I ask, Tiff, I want you to go here because this is Tiff's conversation, but I do want to, this was Tiff's idea. Tiff is ready to claim that, and we're fine. We all weighed in. We all said what we said, but I have a quick question for you, and this is a focus group for this podcast. How many of you all were in Jack and Jill? Raise your hands. How many of you all or have any sorority or fraternity affiliation? Raise your hands. How many of you all are in the Lynx? I quit. I was in the Lynx. How many of you all are in the Boule? Raise your hands. I'm doing that because Andrew was the most relatable person to them, per their own commentary, and Andrew's the only one who was in the boule. We are not even in the boule, so we get labeled for stuff that we're not even in. But
well, I didn't hear Charlemagne say that.
No, he didn't. He said Jack and Jill of y'all.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to say to set the record straight, because I hear what Charlemagne is saying, and I think a lot of comments echoed that. My personal background aside, I want to say that as a journalist, before I bring up anything on this show, I want our viewers to know I have indeed done my due diligence. So I didn't just watch the clip. How I prepared for that segment, I didn't pay for Patreon, but I did read the transcript of what happened. I even understood the word in question that was tricky, was allude. I understood that the conversation was about payment discrepancy. I spoke to Mark before I did the segment. I looked at literacy rates before I did the segment. I watched a few clips, or not clips, but segments, different segments from Joe Budden's podcast before I did the segment. And I will say, I stand by what I said. My perspectives and opinions don't sway in the winds of public opinion. Sometimes the cheese will stand alone. I do think there is very much a toxic landscape that is fueled by a lot of podcast bros. But I definitely agree with you, Charlemagne. Before you have an interview with anybody, before you sit down and speak on something, I would advise anyone to be well informed, whether it's politics, sports, anything like that. And so I don't think that the issue was that the collective was not well informed. I don't think that was my perspective. I think the issue that a lot of people felt is they felt attacked. And so I want to be clear that I wasn't saying who was an intellectual and who was not. My perspective was there is an anti-intellectual movement ravaging the Black community. I also want to be clear that I was not saying that no one.
I want to say this too about that. I think if there is this anti-intellectual movement, because I'm not totally sold on that as far as a movement goes, it's not just the Black community. That's like why look, there's a lot of shit against us, but not everything is only against us. If there is an anti-intellectual movement, it's against people as a whole. It ain't just Black people. I mean, I think the powers that be who want to control things and people, they seek to do that to everybody, not just Black people. But I do think she's also being disingenuous with her statements. And we'll let her keep going, though.
Should talk to Flip or Joe Budden. Certainly somebody should. Someone should be reaching out to them. That's not my ministry. Things I care about are the incarcerated and puppies. Most importantly, pit bull.
Yeah, but for you to give such a scathing criticism, then you made it your ministry or you made it your business. I feel like this. You can comment on something and it still not be something maybe you give much time to or whatever. But if you're going to give somebody a scathing criticism and allude to them being foolish, because that's what she did, let's just be honest, allude to maybe their type of platform being less than desirable when it comes to people like you, right? And maybe even contributing to this anti-intellectual movement, maybe. If you're going to allude to these things, at least to the point where Joe Budden construes your statements in that way, then you can't just wash your hands and be like, nah, that ain't my thing. That ain't my ministry, man. But you just basically called me all types of names and disrespected my staff. You actually, in a way, disrespected your own friend, but then you can't have this conversation because that ain't your ministry. I think that's throwing rocks and hiding your hands, man. That's bullshit.
I don't like that tens of thousands of them get euthanized every month. It breaks my heart. I think about the incarcerated all the time. I don't want our Black men and women in prison thinking they're forgotten about. I think it's a bit arrogant of me to say, Angela, Bakari, Andrew, y'all should be talking to the incarcerated. That's not their ministry. But if Angela feels like, no, those are the people, or you, Charlemagne, if you feel like, no, those are the very people I want to be speaking to, then by all means, go do that. I'm saying it's hard to fill a cup that's already full. So if I'm telling you something and you're insulting me for my intelligence, I don't need to be where fools gather. So I stand on what I said. I'm not disrespecting.
Yeah, but if somebody's insulting you, don't mean they're fools, even if they're acting foolish. Two, if you say something that could be insulting to them, what does that make you then?
any of them, but I just want to be clear, our viewers know I never come on this podcast ever without being very well informed and researched and fact checked. And a fact check is not a 30-second Google search before I come on this show. It takes a lot of work to prepare for anything I introduce, and I would hope that we all do that.
Well, Tiff, it's interesting. You say you like talking to the incarcerated. Like, who do you think the incarcerated are listening to? Like, the incarcerated are listening to things like the Joe Budden podcast. Like, they're listening to, places like the Breakfast Club. Like, that's who they're actually tuning into. I know because I go speak at the jails. I was at Rikers Island a couple of weeks ago with Shaka Sinclair. I know when, these brothers from Rikers Island are writing into the Breakfast Club and telling me, like, what they like to listen to, what they like to read. So if you are trying to reach.
Damn. He kind of killed her with that one because she just touted her research and what she's into, and she don't even know this. Charlemagne saying, look, I've been in the jails and I'm telling you what they listen to, but she says she do her research, man. So I don't know, maybe, and that's not to say she's not involved in these things and she don't care about them either. I'm not saying that, but he's making a good counterpoint.
The incarcerated, you got to go where the incarcerated is at. Like,
I go directly into the prisons as well through a teaching program and also through a journalism program that I've talked about here. Prison journalism is a project that I support. So I'm not necessarily trying to talk to Joe Budden to talk to the incarcerated. I'm trying to talk directly to the incarcerated. I don't want to air out anybody's business.
She's missing his point. She's missing his point. His point is that Joe Budden and them speaks to the very people that she's talking about her ministry is for. So when she kind of denigrates or diminishes the impact or even the usefulness of a Joe Budden's podcast, she, you know what I'm saying? She's kind of missing the whole point that Charlemagne is making by saying the things that she's saying right now.
But I got people in my immediate family who are the incarcerated, which is another thing. I think it's important for people to understand. I am not, I don't think that intellect has anything to do with degrees, pedigree, how much money you make. Because I saw a lot of they all make more money than you. I know a lot of rich fools and I know a lot of degreed idiots. I've sat across from tables of CEOs who I did not find terribly intelligent. I went to school with a lot of debutantes that I don't find terribly intelligent. It's not a diss to them, but I wouldn't necessarily put them in that category either. I think it's important. I just want people to know I don't come from, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. In my family right now, I'm not of that world. And I don't think, what we call like elitism, I don't necessarily think being of that world is a bad thing. I also don't believe in putting people down because you did grow up privileged or because you did have parents who had multiple degrees or money. Like, none of these things makes you a bad person. To me, what I find frustrating is when you are not receptive or curious. I don't need to talk to people wherever you are, whatever your background is. If you're not receptive or curious, then you are likely not my audience and I'm likely not yours. I am curious about things. I can learn.
I feel like this is a contradiction. Two things I will ask. One is, what makes her think that Joe Budden and his podcast wouldn't be receptive or curious to having conversations? Maybe not now, since after what she said or whatever, or after the comments, but what would make her think that would be the case initially? And two, would she not be doing that herself by making the same statements that she's making, by not being receptive or curious because she doesn't think something's her ministry? We all know we can, and even if you're going by what you think God is telling you, we all know we could think God don't want me over there, God don't want me doing this, but he can be telling, that'd be you saying that because you don't want to be over there dealing with what you're dealing with. You don't want to get outside your comfort zone. You know what I'm saying? So, and then we'll put it on, oh, God don't want me, or that ain't my ministry. No, he's trying to get you over there. That's why things like this happen for a reason. You know what I mean? But I do find it interesting saying that other people should be like basically teachable and open, but she doesn't seem like she's being too open and teachable as far as that goes.
Learn from anybody, but I don't necessarily respect everybody's opinion. And I don't think all the people say I respect everybody's opinion. You's a lie. I don't believe that.
Right.
There are people there. Go ahead.
Can you be intellectually curious without respecting everybody's opinion?
Yes. You looking at somebody who's intellectually curious without respecting everybody's opinion.
Because I consider myself intellectually curious, so I'm the type of person that I'm gonna hear you out. I may not want to hear you again, but I'm gonna at least take the opportunity to listen to you at least one time.
No, there's a gentleman by the name of Corey. He is a lovely person. He happens to be schizophrenic and homeless, and he's in the front of my building, and he has an opinion on everything. And I sit there and chat with Corey sometimes just because he's so nice and so sweet, and I give him bread because he likes to feed the birds. I don't respect Corey's opinion on anything. He got opinion on the financial systems and the banks and all the things that he wants to tell me about. I'm nice to him. I'm kind to him. I give him bread. I would be lying to you to say I respect.
Yeah, but that's an extreme example. She's not using the right examples. I mean, come on. That's not the same thing as maybe having a convo with a Joe Budden or members of the panel. It's not the same thing. Come on, man.
Corey's opinion. When I have interviewed,
you had to speak to him. You had to speak to him at least one time to understand that.
Yes, I can speak to anybody. Yeah. I'm never saying I don't speak to anybody. But once I ascertain, oh, you are not a curious person. Once you are saying things to me like you using tricky words, and this isn't just a center flip in that conversation, because I'm really trying to broaden this out into anybody who's incurious. Once you are clear to me that you are not curious about what I have to say, when I would interview different like men on the street interviews during the Obama race, and people would say the most ignorant things to me. Or when you would hear lazy reporters go out to Trump rallies and they would say, well, Obama gave Iran millions of dollars. He's in cahoots with Iran and he's a Muslim. I don't respect your opinion anymore. Now you sound like a fool, and I'm giving you reason right there in real time, challenging you, but I can't fill a cup that's already full. So now, no, I don't respect your opinion. And Bakari said this is South Carolina saying, but I think all black folks say this. If I'm arguing with a fool from a distance, you can't tell the difference. I don't need to be where fools gather. If somebody else feels called to say, no, it is my ministry to go inform, to go educate this particular group of people, I would never shit on that. That's just not even my way. I'm like, live and let live, go do it. That's just not what I choose to do.
I understand. I guess the issue comes, and I can't believe I'm on here defending the Joe Budden podcast, right? but I guess the issue is, I don't think fools go together at the Joe Budden podcast. I don't think anybody in that room.
I didn't say that, for the record.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in that room is a fool.
Yeah, but she's intimating it. She's the one using tricky verbiage right now, right? She's intimating it. And I will say this too, and this ain't to defend nobody, because I don't care. I'm just trying to listen to the conversation to see who's trying to be genuine about what they're saying or not. I don't think has she attempted to talk to Flip? I mean, Mark Lamont Hill seems to be okay with still being on the show and conversing with Flip. Has she attempted to talk to him, and maybe he gave off that vibe or came off that way? I'm just wondering how she knows that Flip would be the type of person who's not, as she says, intellectually curious or open to having a dialogue. I wonder how does she know that, or is she just assuming that because she's speaking like she's coming from a place of, personal knowledge or experience about that specifically.
And I also feel like, we should be happy that people like Mark Lamont Hill want to be on big black platforms. I think that's the biggest problem I have right now is that, we tend to knock, certain platforms when what we should be doing is infiltrating those platforms. I know everybody likes to, go at Stephen A. Smith. I want to see more black elected officials, more black politicians, more black spiritual leaders, more black activists, more black people with something to say about black issues go on platforms like Stephen A. Smith. Because all the white elected officials are taking advantage of it.
Do you know why they're taking advantage of it? Because they're laughing at a fool. That when people because I think that's such an important point. White politicians are going on there because they are elevating him to a position, and they only do this specifically in the black community. They are elevating him into a position that he did not earn. He is an expert in sports. And so you will have white people all the time pluck an entertainer. Right. Well, whatever he expert in is not politics, is not policy.
But
and if you don't pluck an entertainer,
he has an audience.
An audience does not equate to intellect or intelligence.
You guys,
I'm not saying
I want to hear
it
what
does.
you have to say about defending Stephen. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying these black people who have these large audiences instead of sitting on the sidelines complaining about them having a large audience and who didn't earn what, how about go on that platform and deliver some of that truth or some of that intellect that you have to his audience? Like, even if you sit around and you talk about, you saying about the guy, the person that sits outside of your stoop and they have a lot of misinformation, or you talk about the people that were saying the things about Obama. Those people will continue to have misinformation if somebody doesn't go to them and inform them.
But so this is the point that you missed. Let me just respond, please. This is the point that maybe you missed. I'm saying, when I'm trying to inform you, when I'm saying, no, that is actually not true about Obama, and somebody saying, yes, it is, because okay, you are not curious at that point. You are not receptive. Right. I can't feel your bucket is full. You don't want to hear what I have to say. Number two, I'm not complaining about anyone having a large audience. I'm complaining about who his audience is. He has a large audience of mostly conservative white folks, and they are treating him. This is no diss to Stephen. Do you have data to back that up,
Tiffany? Do you have statistics that say Stephen A. Smith's audience is majority conservative white folks?
I do. Nielsen ratings, or his ESPN show, Nielsen ratings qualifies that.
Well, no, that's ESPN. I'm talking about his podcast, because most of the time when he's spewing political things,
I don't know his podcast. I just know he built his audience on a majority of white people. So I don't, and I would love to dig into, and I'm happy to come on here next week, because I would love to somebody to prove to me that his audience is a majority of black people.
See, that's a feeling, but that's a fact. So does that make you anti-intellectual because you're spewing feelings instead of actual?
No, but it's not even. I want to respond to this. It's not even a feeling, though.
It's literally 5 minutes left in the conversation.
But I want to respond to what he said.
You guys haven't let anybody else weigh in.
I'll weigh in, but I'm going to respond to this. He said that's a feeling or an opinion. Not necessarily. It's somewhat informed, because if you look at who his audience, how he built his audience, the suggestion that a majority of his audience would be comprised of black people is not
It's conjecture, and it might be true, but it's conjecture. You don't know. That's all you got to say. Just be like, okay, you know what? I don't know. I misspoke. I shouldn't have said that. But I still think that she's doing this thing. And again, this goes back to the Joe Budden podcast, the comments about Flip, and the podcast in general. And all Charlemagne is saying is, if you feel like there's something lacking, it could be the one to maybe collaborate and bring that element. Now, I don't have to be, and I agree with her on that. She doesn't have to make that her job, her ministry. But again, you open up the door for that when you have a harsh criticism of something, to at least have the dialogue. You ain't got to, let's team up with Joe Budden and do all this and that. No. But if you're going to start talking like we're foolish, or our platform is foolish, and we're not open to dialogue, and we're just stupid and we're stuck, because that's what she's doing, man. Listen, if anybody was saying this in reference to something that happened to you or people around you, would you not take it as them talking about you? There's no other, you can spin this all. She's trying to do what politicians do, right? And use this word salad, but it ain't working. And so, look, you don't got to make it your ministry, but you made a scathing criticism of the pod in general. So, but you said you don't need to have that conversation because they're closed-minded, essentially. But I'm just curious if that invitation was open and they said no. That's what I would want to know.
Informed one. It's logic to say most of his audience are white people. Are you suggesting that most of his audience are black people?
I don't know what most of his audience is, but I know I started, reading Stephen A.'s columns when he was writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer, when he was covering Allen Iverson way back in the day. And then I followed him to Cold Pizza and First Take and everything else. I think that this new, political Stephen A. with a conservative audience is relatively new. So I would, before these white people were talking about him, it was majority black people in the barbershop that was talking about Stephen A. But I'm just talking about the audience in general. Like, you said Mark Lamont Hill shouldn't be on Joe Budden's show. Why? You said
did I say he shouldn't be?
You actually said he should be on CNN.
Yes. So that's the difference between saying he should not be on Joe Budden. I'm saying he should be on CNN because he should have never gotten fired from CNN. If Mark is happy on Joe Budden's podcast, more power to it. What I said was they lack an understanding of Mark. I felt like he's disrespected on that podcast based on clips that I had seen. What Angela said, and Angela caught a lot of strays for things I said, so I want to be clear. What Angela referenced was a moment where they dismissed his humanity on that show when he talked about his friends being killed in Palestine. And I do think that is based on what I've seen, I do think that is a consistent pattern where I do feel like Mark is not necessarily well received there. But Angela wants to get other people in, so I'll be quiet.
I will say Joe did apologize.
Leonard and Tiffany, it's more than just you two in here. Just hold on. You the one that got a heart. Like, let me get these dudes in here.
I know, but Joe did apologize.
This is crazy.
But Joe did apologize for that moment.
We gonna get to all that if you two will let somebody else talk.
We can continue, Charlemagne, another time. I'm happy to.
I would love it.
I
like the conversation. 30 minutes to go next time.
Charlemagne, to be continued.
Damn. Bakari, go. You were trying to talk 20 minutes ago.
I got to like 110, 115.
Oh, now you got time. God damn it. Go ahead, B.
I was just appreciating watching the mini pod that we just saw.
I know we the invisible man, bro.
It's a good conversation.
It was all right. My only criticism of us, I think, as we approach these discussions is that a part of that intellectual curiosity that we all must have, we must be able to accept criticism without necessarily being defensive, and that being our immediate posture to it. And one of the things that I saw in the comments, and one of the things that I saw when Joe Budden was making those comments, is we want to be individuals that people come to. It's in our phrase, it's welcome home, that feel as if there is a comfort level to come in to our doors and hear the things we have to say. And whether or not we're talking about it from a respect perspective or intellect perspective, I think that throughout that conversation, it's not that we can't sit out here and be like, I'm sorry you felt that way, because that's like human gaslighting. We have to acknowledge that there were people who felt foreclosed from a conversation because of our tone, tenor, vocabulary. And how do we make sure that these are some of the people that we do want to reach, or at least I want to reach? That may not be everybody's ministry, but I would like to have some of those listeners from Joe that are like, maybe we can come over there too. Maybe there's an hour we can spend there too. And that may never happen, but that's just kind of my perspective on it. And I feel like the only other thing that I felt was like weird, and I know we don't do that and we fixed it, but I was glad that we didn't necessarily stick with using, that Joe Budden in the title, and y'all had my face. It was handsome, but we had like Joe Budden in the title on the YouTube.
I'm gonna get to that, B. Don't be trying to scoop me, B.
I told Angela that too. I was like, yo,
no, but I'm just saying, it was first of all, but it was my face, and I didn't know, and I just felt like, damn, it's Bakari Sellers' face.
Description, because I don't have no clue.
No problem. So we had our thumbnail. What Bakari's talking about is the thumbnail for last week's show said Joe Budden's podcast and the dumbing down of America, and Bakari standing there in the middle getting the haze up. He getting haze up for another 2 months. So he was in the middle of it. And I think that what we did wrong, and I do want to apologize to Joe Budden's podcast, to their team, to their production company for that title. I'm an EP on this show, and so I own that wholeheartedly. We should have titled it differently. Maybe they wouldn't have looked at it, but they got us back. They got the whole podcast taken down for copyright infringement because we actually used their clip. They only took that clip out. It's still under challenge. We reposted it without the clip. But I would just say to them, well played, but I do apologize for titling the podcast. Well,
maybe it was meant for that purpose, though. I mean, the conversation we had was about the dumbing down of...
But I think that what they took offense to is that it looked like we were saying that they are responsible for the dumbing down.
Yeah, why wouldn't they though? That's the end of the clip. Yeah, I would think the same shit. So somebody said Tiffany reminds me of Mel, and this is exactly why I don't miss her, because instead of being honest about her comments, she makes excuses for them and double talks, insults them, and then says she never insults anyone and is well researched, then calls them podcast bros like what? Shaking my head. And Mark can sit this out. I don't want to hear him remix what she's saying again to make it palatable, respectfully. Tiffany doesn't understand that Mark be firing at his co-host more than the reverse. Mark be shooting shots. If Tiffany truly did her due diligence, she would watch past episodes to know that Flip always asks questions and is probably the most curious person up there. He doesn't shy away from learning. Their audio is trash. Flip is so curious So she basically is still talking without having done due diligence by watching a few pods to understand flip. So her due diligence is watching various clips, and from those clips, she's ascertained that Mark isn't respected or well received on the show. So she's standing on her square. How do you get through to someone like that? And one more. Okay, so she's just a closed-minded person. Stand on my square, even though everyone, including your people, telling you you're wrong. And her claiming she did research actually makes it worse, because that means you either lying or was biased towards Mark and just don't like the JBP. And look, I ain't got nothing against none of these people because I don't know them all like that. I will say, though, that it seems like the very thing she's criticizing, she's doing. That's the problem. You can have your own opinion. I do want to say that. She can have whatever it is she feels like her ministry is her ministry. I fully understand that. You don't want to go too far outside yourself. I do think that as people, we sometimes get so focused on one thing, though, we can sometimes we won't hear when we're being called to minister somewhere else, right? But I think the main issue is that the very thing she's criticizing and saying she's doing, and she's being contradictory, where she's talking about all this being well researched, and it all sounds good. It's what you call gaslight. It all sounds good, but the more she talks, she contradicts herself. So, I mean, would there ever be, at least Angela Robb apologized at the end. They should have knew Joe Budden was going to hit him for that clip anyway. Anybody noticed that, man, if you react to the videos. But it would be interesting to see if there's any sort of dialogue beyond this. I doubt it. But tell me what y'all think about this in the comment section below, man. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'll check y'all in the next one.